Aloha, it's Jennifer Victoria Bell, and I wanted to share a little bit about how I am navigating all the news and for what's going on right now. And I think it's important for us to start to do this kind of processing through because it's very difficult. There's so many moving pieces right now that it's difficult to discern. It's difficult to keep up with all the changes. It's taking a little bit of kind of like calculated skill and patience, and then tuning in within. But I'm going to take this into a kind of large picture, which is aloha, which is that if I take this into if I take this into the system of, let's say, Rosicrucianism, which a lot of you might not be familiar with, but this is independent Rosicrucianism, and this a lot of this is coming from Rudolf Steiner, but there are echoes of this in other traditions and in other philosophies. Okay, and if I take it to the to the new agey philosophy, I'll have other words, but basically I'm staying with this one because I think it's easier, because we're just talking about the middle path, that there's a middle path. We could actually call it the path of the Jedi in a way, right? And that we have this middle path of navigating through our life. And then we have extreme paths. We have paths that take us on extremes. So if we take it into the world of the spiritual, most people are calling this, there might be a light path and a dark path. Well, I don't see it that way, because that whole spectrum is a spectrum of light, even the darkness. So the way I see it and the way I organize it is that there's a bright path, right, and a dark path. Neither path is exactly wrong or right. But we have the middle path, or we can call it the harmonizing path. So we have mainstream news. We know that most mainstream news outlets are owned by corporations. They're owned by very few corporations, as a matter of fact. So if you can do that research to find out, I think it's only 5 to 6 corporations own the big media outlets around the world, globally. Then we have a lot of conspiracy theory. People would call it conspiracy theory news. So I'm not going to say which one is dark and which one is bright. I'm just going to call them extremes or polarities. And then we have to be in the harmonizing path. So what happens is, this is what happens if you get caught, okay? In some of the blind, it's like you can either be blinded by you blinded by the light. Like, basically you get blinded by a light either way, whether it's the extreme brightness or the extreme darkness. You're getting blinded either way. So what that means is, here we have lots of the mainstream media. I'm not watching mainstream media. I don't have regular TV. I'm only noticing what people are sharing and what they're reacting to. We have numbers being told to us with people who are testing positive. I just saw an article about the guy from SNL, I guess the band leader who died, and they said there is no cause of death listed, but his symptoms seem to be akin to coronavirus symptoms. Well, that is actually that media outlet should be sued. Should actually be sued, because that is really, really in my personal perspective, that's very detrimental. And it's actually, you're utilizing someone's life to perpetuate an agenda, and it's just not okay. So let me go back. So we have that, right? We have these news, but then you have to understand that the mainstream media is not reporting all the news. It's reporting the news that serves its agenda. That's what we have to understand right then and there. Just because it's reporting the news that serves its agenda doesn't mean that there's not any truth there, because we have to understand that there could be some truth being reported. Now, but if you sit there and watch that, you run the risk of kind of like being brainwashed, to be honest with you. So sometimes it's just not worth sitting there for hours taking that in, because it's not worth the brainwashing and mind control that comes with it. So mainstream media is telling you their agenda based on their corporate backers. And again, like I said, there can be some truth in there. But I just want to make you aware that some doctors are stepping out, and the mainstream media is not talking about this or sharing this, and they are proving that the testing methods they're using right now are not conclusive. They cannot determine if there's a virus present. So I want you to understand that. There are doctors coming out, their science, their logic based on science is sound. Because there are ways to make sure, if you remember grammar school and the scientific method, we have to have ways to safeguard for variables, and you have to have ways to show, to prove, like to make sure that your research or what you're trying to find, right, is what you're actually trying to find. Now, the tests that they're using to determine this, if people have this virus or not, are actually not designed to do that. Now, there are other doctors coming out and saying that, but the mainstream media is not sharing that. So you can look it up yourself. There's a gold standard by which all tests have to meet, and those tests, these doctors have looked at what's come out of China. They've looked at what's come out, and they said they didn't follow the protocol of this testing, and they even said that they didn't, which means that the tests they're using right now currently are not tests that can tell you if you have this thing that we're all talking about. What it is showing, or why it's not conclusive, is because it's showing that they've done some, like, you really have to do some research. And I would say if you're going to look around, you're going to want to look at Dr. Thomas Cowan, and I can't remember the other guy's name. I'll post it after this live. I'll try to post these videos so you can see for yourself and discern for yourself. But you have to understand that if you don't know this, think about it. You go to medical school and you spend all that money, and it's a lot of money, and you have a career. Are you going to step out of rank and risk your career? How many doctors do you think are willing to step out of rank and risk their career? So that's why I'm saying, like, you would expect more doctors to be saying, well, this test really isn't conclusive, but not enough doctors are willing to risk to do that. So it's very important that you kind of get this piece of information, and you get to understand that what you're getting through the mainstream media is serving an agenda. And like I said, there can be some truth there. This is how this is harmonizing. I'm not saying this is all bad over here. This is all bad over here. This is all wrong. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you have to be able to see past the agenda and see past the things that there are things not being shown to you. It's very difficult to find the truth right now. And so that's why I'm very happy to see that there are other doctors coming out that are saying this isn't right. This doesn't seem right. And even a doctor in Brooklyn shared that the way that what he's observing in patients, and he is assigned to these patients that we're talking about, does not react the way that a typical virus would. In fact, what he's saying is it looks like oxygen deprivation, meaning the way he described it, and you can hit, I can't remember his name, I'll have to look, but he's at a Brooklyn hospital. He said that people, well, the way he's observing it, it looks like people were dropped at the top of Mount Everest without any breathing apparatus to support the altitude change. So that's a very important key thing to understand, that there are doctors that are stepping out and saying this, but you're not getting it on the mainstream media. Now, we have the other alternative media. We have conspiracy theory media. Now, there is some truth there as well. There is some stuff there that there's no proof. Like, I can't find any proof for things yet. And so that's why I won't share as much about that side, because I cannot find, again, like enough valid proof from this side, to share more about it yet. Okay, so that's what I want to say here. But what happens is, if you're, why I'm saying this is because I see this in teaching spirituality all the time. There are people blinded on both sides, right? In a way. So we have blinded by love and light. We have people that are blinded. Everything is love and everything is light. Well, yes, it is. That's true. But that doesn't mean you don't take responsibility for your actions. It doesn't mean that you don't try to improve yourself. It doesn't mean that you don't, you know, it's like, that would be kind of like, well, it's all love and light, so I can just do whatever I want. Well, it's kind of, that doesn't make sense, like, even in my mind. There's this, it's like that, it's like a hyper spiritual way of being, and you're not doing the real world, or like physical dimensional stuff that needs to happen. And I've seen very extreme cases where people leave their children because they're following their spiritual journey. Well, that doesn't make sense. And that is that kind of blinded by the light side, right? Now, blinded by the dark side over here could be, basically, you have and you could be very materialistic or very rigid and stuck in the physical world and never seeing anything, spiritual. You're always looking for fact. You're always looking, for something in the physical world to explain things. And that's not how life works, right? The other side of that, because it can be a spiritual thing, is that those ones that are blinded by the light on this side can be talking love and light and also be able to help you awaken to some degree. But then over here, on this side, they are doing things to kind of covet your energy and to manipulate you. So on both sides, there's some manipulation. And like on this conspiracy theory side, it's like you can see, like, these people they have this sense that something is off. They know that they're not being told the truth, and they're trying to find it anywhere they can. But even some of them are getting lost. I'm seeing in that community they're getting lost because they think there's a savior there's a savior. Someone is saving them. And I don't want to say that's wrong. What I want to say is that we have to do the work ourselves. It's a time of personal responsibility. And so that's why it's like we look to blame certain things or certain people, we get stuck. We get stuck in being blind instead of being harmonized. And I can tell you, like, just by watching those two videos, just a piece of awareness, and you have to do your research because I didn't research this yet. But do you remember the Zika virus and how the babies were going to be born with shrunken heads? Well, a very top medical professional that you're all watching on TV is the one who said that was going to happen. So you have to watch, you understand, and do a little digging, but not get lost in the digging. It's important that you come into your center. We have a very centered way of being. So what that means is, and this is pervasive throughout Taoism, to Tibetan Buddhism. We can even think about it like, in Christianity, right? As the cross. We can look at it as, in many different, like, pervasive through many different spiritual lineages. This central pillar is a very important piece of to develop. Very, very important. And in fact, I developed something that I'm going to put out as a product, actually, to help you develop this strength in this pillar. This is the central pillar. But again, we look at it, this needs to be developed first. Your connection between heaven and earth needs to be developed, managed, organized first. That helps you to understand, to feel truth. That helps you to be able to navigate these sides that will blind you. And what I want to say is, it's important. This is not just people in the outer world that are blinding you. You have your own internal thoughts that will try to, that are teaching you. Like, they're kind of, as you're leaning from side to side, trying to find that center. So it's important to understand that it's not always external. Like, you have your own internal, like, I like to look, we just think about it. You have the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder. Now, that's a very simplistic way of describing it. But we all have these parts. We all need to understand we have these parts. And so that's how I'm able to navigate through and understand when I see the numbers coming through mainstream media. I know they're being manipulated. I also know, now that I know the actual tests that are being used, at least a few doctors are coming out and saying the testing that they're using is not a test that actually can determine if people have this thing we're talking about, this virus. So they're saying that those tests aren't conclusive. So what's happening, and a lot of people could get really angry and be angry at me. I'm just sharing a perspective, and I'm only sharing my process. So you have to do your own process. I invite you to develop your own, to figure out your own way. But what I want to say to you is that, that how mad would you be if you found out that maybe if this were the truth, this is the truth, that this is a big lie, right? That this virus is actually, if this is actually not a true thing, how mad are you going to be if you find out that's the truth? I'm not saying it's the truth. I'm saying, imagine that. Imagine that comes out, that this virus isn't what they say it was, and that it's crashed. It's like it's affecting our economy. It's affecting our way of life. And even today, what really upset me was to see that the World Health Organization is saying they're going to come into your home and take your children. There's a video, you can find that. Basically saying not even your home is safe anymore. That underlying message is your home is not even safe anymore. So we're having all of these, big world organizations spreading fear, and it's being spread throughout the media. It's not okay. That's actually very not okay. And in fact, again, I think I said this before, I would love to find an attorney who could manage basically a class action suit against the media and against the government and against these government organizations that are perpetuating this great amount of fear. Because I don't think, even if we had something that was this level of pandemic that's being told to us, that's a necessary way of treating people. And I think that's abusive, truthfully. It's very abusive. So in my personal opinion, so again, like I said, I'm just sharing my perspective. I want you to understand how I go through, and like I said, I don't watch the news. I'm only responding to what people are posting and sharing that's coming through from the news and the media. And that what I want to say is, like, you have to find the people that are, the people that are willing to break ranks, the people who are willing to risk their career to come out and say, this doesn't feel right. Those are people you want to watch. Those are people you want to watch. The people that have everything to lose and nothing to gain. That's a one way to discern, right? So it's, in that, people who are not backed by corporations, people who are not funding corporations. We have to also follow the money. So this is a way for me to understand that if you do your research, and I would definitely look at Dr. Thomas Cowan, because he breaks it down about these tests that they're using aren't conclusive for viruses. And even the person who invented the testing said this should never be used for an epidemic, this test. I'm just telling you. So like I said, I'll post the videos under here so you can see that and understand why I'm more calm. maybe than other people, why I don't, and I value life. Look, I value life, but part of life is death, and that's the truth. And I feel we need to do whatever we can do as people to protect and help each other, but not by being fearful, not by, you know, ratting your neighbors out maybe for being outside or doing something that you don't think is part of the what should be done while this is happening, and have, like, because we need to have more compassion for one another. We need to understand that people are doing the best that they can, and if they're not personally harming anyone, we need to be a little bit more understanding. So I'm just putting that out there so you can start to look for yourself. You can start to determine and discern for yourself. And it's a very important thing for me to share. It's it's important even for my clients who are spiritual entrepreneurs running a business and having to look back and, you know, look back at their journey, look back at people they may have studied with, where they're saying, oh, they were on this bright side, or they were on this dark side, and it actually kind of like it took me out of my harmonized center, and now I have to come back into it. So that's a lot of the work that I actually have to do with people, with clients, because they've studied with people who haven't developed their center yet. And there's a lot of that going on. And so this is why I could take this that I've developed from being a spiritual entrepreneur, and to understand that, like, not everyone is, you know, we have to be more compassionate, and also realize that there are people who, you know, there's always kind of like, there could be always like a benefic experience out of something that seems not, that seems malefic, right? Or malicious. So we have to understand that it's not so simple. That's what happens when you mature as a person. You get to see that things aren't simple, things aren't black and white. There are a lot of gray areas, and that not everybody is like, you know, this is not this is not the naughty and nice list, because we've all done things in our lives that we probably don't feel so good about, right? And that means that you may have caused detriment. You may have, but on some level, that detriment may have been a blessing. Did you ever have that experience where you had a relationship and something happened where it just didn't work out? And it was maybe not such a pleasant experience, but afterwards and after reflection, you realize the benefit and the blessings. We have to be there all the time in a way. We have to we have to do the energy work to be in our center. This is key. This is part of why a lot of people are struggling, because this is not something that people are, you need to come visit me, absolutely, Travis. This is not something that people have taken the time to develop. And because we're not taught, this is, you know, we've been, like, this is the way I look at it. You know, a lot of scientists have forgotten the natural world. They've forgotten the impact on the environment, on the human. And you can't account for that in medication or in testing. It's hard to, how do you recreate the variables of the physical environment over time, over years, and the impact that has on a human body and on someone's mind and emotions? You can't. That requires a listening skill that's been lost in the medical profession. It requires a understanding of the natural world, which has been lost in the medical profession. Honestly, if you can't see that, we gotta like, you gotta rewind, because that's something that has to be considered. And, you know, because if we look back, I'm gonna look back. Okay. Do you know where malaria comes from? Do you know malaria? Malaria comes from humans living close to horses. What other disease do you know of where humans are living close to an animal, right? That Lyme. Lyme. It takes a lot. It takes this kind of open-mindedness, understanding to understand that this could be coming. Something comes sometimes from the natural world that impacts the human living experience and the the human biology. And this has not been taken into consideration with what's going on right now, not by the masses, not by the mainstream. And if I can do anything for anybody ever, I want to help open up your perspective so you can see the truth but still be in your center. I think this is very important to understand, that there's so much to discern, there's so much to navigate, there's a lot to navigate through. But if you're being pulled to be blind to a specific way, if there's a lot of judgment in that way, if there's not an understanding of, well, here's some benefit and here's some detriment, right? Maybe we can list benefit and detriment to what's happening right now, right? And if I have to collectively, just from my experience with my clients, kind of give you the benefit, I would say they're becoming more creative. They're reaching into their creativity in a new way, and they're creating new ways. They're being resourceful. They're getting, a lot of my clients are getting more time with their children, more family time. They're being more bonded as a family unit. And if I look at on the detrimental side, what I look at is the fear mongering, especially with that new thing that came out with the World Health Organization saying they're going to come into your home and remove people from your home. Well, that makes absolute no sense. I mean, no sense. All that's doing is saying to you, don't even feel safe at home, because right now we feel safe at home. That's just saying, don't even feel safe there. That is a strategic manipulation of your sympathetic nervous system. I'm telling you that right now, so you understand that. And like I said, that is actual abuse. It's abuse. Okay. So it's kind of like saying, I'm gonna take the person you love away, and you can't do anything about it. Who does that? Or who does that? Like, oh, don't tell anyone because I will hurt this person. It's the same kind of abuse. It's actual abuse. So I wanted to open up your mind to say, like, what happens is we look at people on TV and we think they're familiar, and we think, oh, they're an authority, so they must know, so we must adhere to what they're saying. But if you really tune in to what they're saying and what they're doing, that, especially with that is abuse. It's abuse of humans. So I want you to be able to be in your heart and to understand that you have an infinite, you have a connection, you have a soul that's infinite. That's backed by an infinite spirit. We have all of life itself. We have connections with nature. We are very powerful beings. Otherwise, there wouldn't be an agenda to control us. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave that here. Like I said, I'll share the videos under this because I don't want this to be taken down. And hopefully they're still up. And yeah, just remember that we are very powerful beings. That's why there is an agenda to control us. So if we come together and unite and to support each other as humans, and can be more passionate and understanding of each other as humans, we can actually get through this truthfully together. So lots of love and aloha.